Welcome to Inside Pleasantville School District. I'm Emily Rubin Persons, your host and Board of Ed trustee. You know, we frequently use the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, we know that it actually also takes a village to educate a child. Schools have become so much more than a place to learn math, science, and writing essays. We're required now to expand so much more into character development, emotional well-being, cultural awareness, good citizenship, that's a long one, and so much more. The world is so complex, and we are really fortunate in our village to welcome our community partners to help us best meet the needs of our students. And our favorite community partner is our police chief, Erik Grtutzner. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Emily, thank you so much for having me.
So, Chief of Police.
Yes.
What's the path? Skim your resume for me.
So I was hired here in Pleasantville in 1994.
1994.
So I was a young man. I was lucky enough prior to taking the police exam. I really did not have an interest in police work until I got a part-time summer job. I was actually in college to become a history teacher and got a part-time job, summer job working for the county police. And I absolutely love police work. I love the work. I love the people who I worked with. So I sat for a police exam, and in 1994, Pleasantville called me, and I joined the force here.
Oh, wow. So you were a history major, and your dad was a cop.
Correct, yes. So
Never got the bug from him.
No, I had seen him be a police officer, and you know, I saw he was a detective, he was a sergeant, did a lot of different jobs, and it never really appealed to me. And it wasn't until I actually found out what actually goes on that it started to become much more interesting to me.
That's so interesting. So what's the typical roadmap of somebody to become a police officer? Is it what you did, or? I
mean, everyone takes their own path. It all starts off with taking a police test. Here for Pleasantville, it's a Westchester County test that we administer. And we take people who score high on that list. When I took the test, it was a lot of people took the test just as an opportunity or as an option. You didn't really have a lot of people who aspired into this career necessarily, but now we often see people who are working in the field. We have people with bachelor's degrees in criminal justice, potentially even higher education towards the field.
Masters and whatever, the social work, coming into being a cop. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that our superintendent, Mary Fox-Salter, she talks a lot about, particularly since the Sandy Hook massacre and all of that, was how fortunate we are in Pleasantville that we're like a fishbowl. You know, the three schools are just smack in the middle of town, and also, as I'm sure you've heard her say at some of the board meetings, and how quickly how quick a police officer can get to the school. But you come into the school for so many other programs. Talk a little bit about, you know, that elementary, middle, like what are some of the things that we do here? I kind of forget it's been a while since I was in elementary school.
So our goal is to be in front of the kids as often as possible in a professional setting, spend as much time with them as we can to make them comfortable, so that whether we're in the school or we see them outside of the school, they're comfortable with us. They're not intimidated by the uniform, which is very common. You know, if we see them outside of school, sometimes it can be under bad circumstances. So seeing a friendly face. We do a number of programs to be in front of the kids. You know, especially pre-COVID, we were in the Bedford Road School at least once a year with what we did was the Officer Phil program, where we brought in someone to interact with the kids, do an assembly, do a presentation that we would be a part of that talked about safety and talked about, you know, police officers and first responders. We did Halloween programs. We would do any opportunity really to be in front of the kids.
Right, and I can remember even like the first day of school, sometimes there's a police officer in front of the buildings. And one year I said, you know, what's going on? And it's just comfortable police presence. And it's true, it just makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. So you're in the elementary school, and then the middle school, I think you do a little bit more.
So the middle school, it becomes a little bit more formalized. Our youth officer, Detective Joe Zane, will be in the schools teaching a class once a week.
Oh, once a week?
Once a week he's in there teaching different 8th graders. The idea is to talk about, you know, drug and alcohol awareness, but obviously we encourage that youth officer to have any conversation that comes up. It builds relationships with the kids, and you know, when they're they're starting at that 8th grade level, they're starting to now see more likely they're going to be involved with the officers outside of, even if it's just being downtown or something, you know, they're going to be dealing with these officers. So let's build relationships. And then, of course, any questions that come up, issues that come up, we've had opportunities where the kids have talked to the youth officer outside of class or had a relationship that they could approach them with concerns that they have about different things. And so it's another opportunity for us to give these kids a pathway to talking to us.
Yeah, and to normalize, you know, the officer, I'm sure, brings up stories and situations so that the kids can feel a little bit comfortable saying, well, what happens if, or, you know, I heard about, or catch them in the hallway and say, you know, I have a question or whatever.
I mean, so Detective Zane is our current youth officer. Before him was Morgan Colhatcher.
Right.
Yep, one of our lieutenants was a youth officer, Jesse Wallman.
Right.
When I started here, it was Steve Benora was the youth officer, and we have always really cherish the relationship with the schools and the opportunity for us to be talking to the kids and spending time with them.
Right. And what is to be is it something special to be a youth officer? Do you have to be trained or something?
So there's definitely training that goes on. There's certifications that the officers are required to have.
Okay.
There's a basic youth officer school. It's 40 hours, and it really talks about the rules and regulations in dealing with whenever you're dealing with a child, especially as a victim or a suspect in a crime, but even as a witness to a situation. And then there's a second week of training that they go to that really works on the interpersonal skills, you know, a little bit less about what's in the book and a little bit more about what's it like to sit in a room with a kid and have a difficult conversation.
Right, because, you know, first, like we've all, you know, seen on TV, like you're not supposed to interview a kid without their parent or without a grown-up and all of that. But then, you know, for a kid, it's hard to talk to the authority if there's a problem. They may want to lie. They may be afraid to tell the truth. And for whatever reason, it's always curious, like, why are they afraid to tell the truth when it's tell the truth, you know?
I mean, there are so many myths, legends around police officers, what we do, why we do what we do, that it's hard for kids to just realize this is just a person who you're talking to who's here to help you. There's a lot of rapport building that goes into those types of conversations, and a lot of you spend a lot of time talking to kids prior to getting to the point of why you're talking to them. Yeah. And, you know, that's with our whole social emotional program, as it's now getting into the younger grades. It's helping kids learn the language, helping kids learn how to express what it is they need to express. Absolutely.
You know, and that's really hard because they've been told what to think and feel for so long.
Yeah, and a lot of these kids are getting to a point where they're starting to feel things that they don't know what it means. They don't know if it's okay. You know, we've all been through this, and the vast majority of the time, everything they feel is perfectly okay and perfectly normal. But you know, not too many kids feel normal all the time. And
coming out of COVID, for sure, you know, because the kids have been through very different circumstances, and you know, as grown-ups, we often, it's like we know kind of the future. I remember one of our guidance counselors saying that to me. So to some degree, the problem of a 7th grader or a 4th grader or an 8th grader, it's like, oh, you know, don't worry about that. It's not that big of a deal. But to them it is.
Right. Yep.
And you know, why are you afraid to tell me the truth here? They're afraid because of who knows what.
Right.
So that's really very interesting. And then what do you do do you do much in the high school? So we do. We have our youth officer will present to the kids when necessary. We have a great relationship, and we're invited anytime into the high school. You know, we do a lot of things at the high school level. The kids are starting to get to a point where it's not just necessarily relationship building. We're actually doing it, you know, when we need things. We're there for the lockdown drills, so they see us for that. We're in and around the schools, but you know, the kids are we're seeing them in a far different level. You know, one of my favorite things used to be on a nice day when all the kids were sitting out in front of the high school, just popping over and saying hello and starting to have a conversation with them. And you would think a group of kids, whether it's in front of the high school or whether it's down in the plaza or somewhere else, when a police officer walks up, they're all going to clam up and they're not going to talk. The fact is,
the kids love it. They love to have us come over and show an interest in what they're doing, and we encourage the officers to keep doing that.
Sure. We had, there was a place we used to hang around when I was in high school, and the cops used to come along and just check on us, and just hang out with us for a little bit, and just, make sure everybody was okay, and they, okay, see you later, and it was fine.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's a challenge for some of the officers. I mean, it's not necessarily it can be an uncomfortable social situation for the officers also. So we definitely look for officers who we feel have that community sort of sense as we're going through the hiring process, and then if they are uncomfortable, then we just work with them to get them to a place where they feel much more comfortable doing that.
Do you think other towns have the same kind of relationship with their local police department that we have in Pleasantville?
So, I don't know. I think it's probably our relationship is based on years. Like I said, many people before me who have made a commitment and realized the importance of it. So it's hard to think that just happens. It just comes from it's extremely common.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's the way it should be. So
I agree.
There's, but I do hear from my colleagues sometimes, we'll talk about a case or an incident or something or a situation, and I'll say, and then I talk to the superintendent of schools, or I talk to the principals, or my lieutenant is speaking with somebody, and they're like, you just go and talk to these people? And I'm like, no, we just pick up the phone and call them. I have everybody's cell phone number, and they can't believe it.
They can't believe that. So, what about, and you're on your own school board, so what about in your school district?
So, I mean, we are dealing with all the same things that everybody else is. We're very lucky where I am. We have a tremendous superintendent who's committed to transparency and communication. Our assistant superintendents are extremely knowledgeable. They're extremely personable.
That's great.
It really, I don't want to say the job is easy, but they make it so much easier than it could be. And it's, this is the first year in my second term, so I'm in my fourth year. Just, as you're just really starting to feel like you know what you're talking about, and things it's not a foreign language anymore.
That's right. All those acronyms.
Exactly. But it's, I think I can bring a certain perspective to the board from my experience and from what I've dealt with.
And to bring the police in.
Sure.
Do they come into the schools?
Into our schools? Well, where I am, I'm up in Brewster. We have SROs in every school building.
So that's a very different thing.
So, but I mean, to your point before about, our response time, we've been lucky in the fact that, we can create a lot of the benefits that the SRO program offers as far as the interpersonal relationships, the quick response times, without necessarily having an officer in the buildings.
That's a very good point. Because look at, you're less than a half a mile, I think, from the Bedford Road School.
I mean, and we always have two officers on the road, so it's hard to imagine. I mean, an officer responding to the school, I can't imagine any reason why we wouldn't have an officer on the grounds of the school within a minute to 90 seconds.
That's right. That's right. Whereas, I think of some of the schools, like Chapco has a long entranceway to their high school. I forget, there's another school, I think it's, I forget the other school I was at not too long ago. Same thing, where it's very isolated.
Right.
The campus is very isolated, and we're all just right here.
Yeah. I mean, it's not always great at arrival and dismissal times when all three schools are within a block or two of each other. But.
And then this morning, this morning of this recording, there was a car accident of some sort right at drop-off time, so I know that put a little snarl in the thing.
It's not great on good days, so when something bad happens, it's even worse. So
another thing that came up, in this past year of a lot more highlight on the police is, and unique also to Pleasantville, is our special needs officer. And I remember, I think it was James Prizeman and his mom Eileen Prizeman. I remember when our first special needs officer was appointed.
Yes.
When was that?
Yeah,
that was like 6 years ago?
I don't think it was that long. It was probably about 4 years ago.
Because I remember being at that meeting. So, that's a really amazing thing because, you're not all trained in mental health. You're not all trained in that, yet you're the first responders.
Right.
And that can be really challenging.
So, that special needs liaison officer, it's not unique to just Pleasantville. It's something we sort of created on our own. We didn't necessarily go out and find it as a model. We thought this community especially needed it, and it was absolutely a conversation with parents of kids who have special needs who had seen in the news sort of some of these negative interactions between police and kids with special needs, and they said, what are we doing to make sure that doesn't happen here?
Right.
So we created an officer who he's still in patrol. He still works around the clock and does everything, but supplemental to those duties, he's tasked with staying in touch with the community, the members of that community, answering their questions, letting them know what we can do for them. If all of a sudden there's a family and we end up at the house a few times in a row, or we start to see that there's a problem, he'll reach out to them. We've been very, knock on wood, we've been extremely successful in the situations where we have to be called for when the kids are having trouble regulating their behavior. We work very hard on that. We've instituted some other programs and done some things with some of our partners in first responders to make sure that we're doing everything as safely as possible. But we understand the concern that families have as far as the behaviors are potentially look strange. They look
and they're
unusual
unique for each kid. So it's not like when you go to this house and you see this behavior, you're always going to recognize it.
Right.
Yeah, that's very challenging.
So we definitely train on empathy, and we train on understanding, but we also don't think there's any substitute for meeting these kids, getting to know them, getting to know the families, and so we thought it was worth it to dedicate somebody specifically to doing that.
My middle son is the class of 2018, and he was the first grade when he started kindergarten. That was when we brought all the kids back into the district. So his grade grew up with the inclusion and completely normalized all of it. So these people who are now 21 are your future first responders. So they have just that much more exposure and experience and comfort in all of different types of people, which is helpful, I would think.
And I think, the special needs community is very much woven into the fabric of this town. And so the kids see it, the parents see it, the officers see it.
Sure.
This what may be atypical behavior is not unusual behavior.
Exactly.
We're a group of students will walk past our headquarters a couple times a day going to different work programs and things like that. So, these aren't necessarily things that surprise us.
Right.
So
that's great.
But it's important for us to get to the parents and let them know that we hear their concerns. And we're working towards making sure that those kids are safe.
And they can share with you information that can, we need the bottom up, not just, or this from the sides, not just top down.
Absolutely.
Rule.
We started a database. Database isn't the right way to say it, but we basically started giving parents the opportunity to give us information on their kids.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Individual concerns. We know that every one of these kids has different challenges and different issues. So we collect that information.
Oh, that's good.
And we have it at our fingertips if ever the time comes that we need to deal with a kid and there isn't a caregiver there to help us out.
That's great. So you're in the buildings, you're meeting the kids, you're teaching them about substance abuse and delinquent behavior and what to do. So what about the trends? Like, what's going on now? We've got the whole cannabis thing, the marijuana law, which, I think hopefully the village is going to opt out for now, which I think would be helpful until we know what all the rules are going to be. But what are the trends? Like, I'm a parent. I have a teenager. What do I need to look out for?
So obviously,
That's a
what you
question.
mentioned, what you just mentioned is a huge thing. It's even before legalization, marijuana was becoming so much more socially acceptable that it was turning up in places that probably we never would have expected it. You never saw gummies or things like that out in the marketplace. And prior to legalization, kids had to go online, but we're still able to purchase these things. Now it's going to be that much, we anticipate it's going to be much easier for kids to get a hold of some things, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. So I think parents should definitely be, educating themselves and working with the schools and any other opportunity to know what it is your kids are potentially doing and are interested in.
And that's, again, another community partner is Pleasantville Strong, because they have the programs, they've got information on their website. to help us see, what do the eyeballs look like?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
The change in attitude, the change in appearance.
Yep.
I always say to my kid, don't ever take a pill. No matter what, don't ever take a pill. And they're like, okay, Mom. But it's, you just, and having the peer pressure.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a big fear, is that they're going to be in a situation where the peers are going to just be a little too strong. And how do you help your kid?
Well, I mean, and I think, and I don't want to generalize, but I think when we were growing up, there was a stigma attached to marijuana that doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And so for that to be the case, you don't need as much peer pressure to overcome the obstacle of that stigma as you probably did in the past.
Right.
So it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I have 2 kids. My daughter's in 6th grade. My son's in 8th grade. So we're coming right into that. We're coming right into that.
But I think with the education, with the awareness, coming into the schools and talking about it, look at how few kids are smoking cigarettes these days, right? Mm-hmm. Compared to in the 70s.
Right.
So by talking about it more, by normalizing the conversation, I think, and there's the designated driver. I mean, that didn't exist when I was in high school. Nobody was a designated driver. Like, what did that even mean?
It's funny. It's funny you should mention that, because I mean, I was on the road. I was an active police officer. I loved working overnights and mm-hmm. being a police officer in a small college town. And the number of college students that we arrested for DWI was extremely small, because they understood it's too dangerous, it's not worth it. They would pile 10 people into a Nissan Sentra to drive back and forth to campus so everybody got home safe.
That's right.
And the person who was driving was usually wearing pajamas because they just got the call to come get everybody.
That's right. And so I think that comfort level of, no, man, I'm not into that. It's like, all right. So I'm hoping that peer pressure has reduced a little bit, where it's like, okay, whatever floats your boat, or hey, I'm the designated driver tonight. And maybe that one kid who doesn't want to deal with the peer pressure is always the designated mm-hmm. driver. And that's their way out. So, I think, education, right? It's what we're all about. And the more we learn and know about each other and about what's going on in the community with their community partners, it helps to give these kids the language they need to maneuver, right? I mean,
we talk about the internet. There's so much more knowledge out there for them. And that's a whole other trend and a whole other issue that we deal with. But there is a lot of information out there, and it's hard not to think that these kids, through their experience, they know more than we did.
Oh, they do.
So they definitely, and that can be a good thing. That can be a good thing.
It is. I mean, I sometimes will bring up something with my son, and he's like, I know that, Mom. I'm like, okay. So, and that's a good thing. So what else? I mean, we kind of, we could sit here and, we kind of touched on, was there anything else that we missed that you're doing in the schools? We got the 8th graders, the elementary. I know you guys have copies of the yearbook. My oldest son was doing something silly when he was in middle school. He's now 25, so it's okay to bring it up. But I got a call from one of the police officers. I said, "How did you know it was my son?" He said, "I have the yearbook." I said, okay. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't doing anything really bad, but it was just more of a like, hey, you might want to tell him not to do that. It was like, okay.
No, I mean, the other really big part of what we do in the schools is just the relationship with the staff and the administration.
That's important too, because then they're comfortable calling you.
Absolutely. And there have been plenty of times where we've had conversations with teachers or principals or somebody and just walked through a situation, and letting them know, building up that trust that we can talk to them, they can talk to us, and it's just invaluable. That's absolutely invaluable.
That's great. Well, we really appreciate it. Mary Foxhalter talks praises about the relationship with the police department almost, all the time. It's such an important partnership for her and for the board. So I thank you very much. Thank you for joining me at the table.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
All right. Until next time.
Indeed.
So now I'm here with another really important community partner, Jolina and Brian Halloran with Break the Hold. Now, we started our educational parenting journey together when Brendan and Rob were in kindergarten together. That was
multiple decades.
Oh my gosh, that was, I can't even think. They're class of 2014.
Yeah. So they're 25 now.
They're 25 now.
About 20 years ago.
And here we are with you, and such important work that you're doing with the school, with the community, with the parents, the kids. Break the hold on mental illness, providing education about suicide prevention. It's just been an incredible journey. Heartfelt and challenging, but taking that unfathomable tragedy and doing such good, for the kids, for the families, for the teachers. So, you want to start? You want me to ask you a question first?
Sure.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to even, nobody wants to think that.
Well, I can start if you'd like.
Yeah, start.
So, as you mentioned, my name is Brian Halloran. I grew up in Pleasantville. I've lived in Pleasantville for a while, a long time.
Yeah, I love your story.
I didn't want to say the exact number.
I love your story, and it's such an important one because you took a different path.
Yeah.
Well, I was one of the original people to be expelled from Pleasantville High School. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So anyway, we'll pass on that for now.
Well, you turned out all right.
Yeah, well, some people think maybe it's questionable. Still up for debate. We got a ways to go.
Okay.
But so been in the community for a long time. A father of 3 boys, all went to Pleasantville. Like Pleasantville, like the community, like the town, like the people, like the school systems even. I like it more now since the tragedy we went through. But you know why we're here today? We had a tragedy back in
2018.
January 23rd, 2018. We were informed of the fact that my son, Brian, my middle son, passed away.
Right.
He died by his own hands. He died by suicide. He added in his second semester at the University of South Carolina.
Right.
8 days after he left us.
Right.
When we felt that. So just for a little background, we knew Brian struggled and we tried to get Brian help, and Brian seemed like he was progressing and doing very much better and well. But that wasn't the case, obviously. And it's always the hidden secrets and the things you don't know and the things that people are afraid to tell you that are really the scary, scary moments.
The masking.
Yep. Right. And you mask, I think, when you really have those serious thoughts. Like, how do you go and tell your parents? How do you go and tell your friend that you're thinking of actually extinguishing your life because you can't stand the thought of being here?
And the journey that he was on to continue, to start the masking early on, will they understand?
Right.
Will they understand that I don't feel good? We're so used to saying to our kids, oh, it's okay. Oh, don't worry about that. It's not that big of a deal. But we're not in their skin.
Right.
We really, it's so the work that you're doing is bringing that language. It's bringing that training. It's helping us understand how.
Yeah, and back then it was worse. They just weren't talking about suicide at all.
No.
Or mental health.
No, not about any mental health.
Right.
It's difficult for someone to understand that if a person is so very loved by friends, by family, has some good things going for them, maybe, people can't understand why they would feel that way.
Of course.
And I think it's even harder for a person like that to move forward and say these things, right? But it's inside, right? You can say you love them. Doesn't mean they feel loved.
Right.
It doesn't mean they feel worthy of love. It doesn't mean they feel good enough to be loved. It doesn't mean they feel comfortable every day.
Right.
It means they feel uneasy and anyway.
Right. And that's the education that you're, building. I took your mission statement, building the resilience, reducing the risk of suicide through education, raising awareness about depression and other mental health challenges. And, I was just saying to Jolina when we sat down here, trauma, PTSD, ADHD, and concussions all have similar traits: poor working memory, emotional dysregulation, forgetfulness, and these things build into depressions and anxiety. And if you had said those then change, they become more physical. They would start situational, become physical. So
it's hard to say what came first, because sometimes you could have a physical imbalance of hormones and other bodily fluids or hormones or whatever mental.
Sure.
in your brain. Chemicals in your brain. Chemical imbalance was the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Right.
But it wasn't diagnosed, and then you have a trauma, and then you have these feelings, and then they see you have a chemical imbalance. So what came first? What happened? It doesn't matter. And you know what? The experts really know very little.
Exactly.
So what we do is we try to take the best approach, and this has been a generational problem. So what BTH has developed with the help of Pleasantville administration is DBT Steps A programming. We bring programming into the school system, in the classroom, so we get 100% participation. What we want to have happen is this be a foundation curriculum situation where when we're gone, it's still going on. And what's going on in Pleasantville right now, we started in 9th grade, we moved to 6th grade, and then we moved to 5th grade. Right now, in middle school, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and now in high school, 9th grade, all get DBT Steps A program instruction.
Incredible.
Probably anywhere from 10 to 15 hours a year. So by the time they get to the high school, they're indoctrinated with it. And
what is it? What is DBT Steps A?
So DBT Steps A, DBT is called dialectical behavior therapy. It was a therapy developed by a person named Marcia Linehan years ago. It's evidence-based and well accepted.
Right.
But these other gentlemen had modified it to make it a curriculum, more of an instructional program. And they did Steps A, designed for adolescents. So it's a evidence-based program that teaches people how to manage their emotional regulation. There's 4 pillars for DBT.
How to manage emotional regulation, because that's the biggest thing. I'm in a tornado mode right now. How do I de-escalate?
How do I react?
How do I react?
That's just one of the pillars of DBT.
Sure.
There's emotional regulation, distress tolerance,
stress tolerance, mindfulness,
and there's one more.
And interpersonal effectiveness. So if you look at mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness, it covers everything in your life. But under those 4 buckets, there's all different instructional, curricula underneath that, right? So they're different. And what we build here is verbiage. People understand it. Make mental health as important as your physical health. Understand the words, understand the feelings, understand what is happening to your body, understand what might be normal, what might not be so normal. Right.
Because when Brian started experiencing it, it was in middle school. And he didn't, a girl, one of his friends, told me later on that he took her aside and said, I'm not feeling well, but I don't understand my feelings. He goes, I don't even know what to call it.
Right.
So they didn't have the verbiage.
And we kind of don't let kids, or we didn't let kids not feel good. It's like, oh, come on, cheer up.
True.
But, I'm not feeling good. And as you just said at the beginning, it's how is it possible that with everything that you've got that you don't feel good? You have everything. But we don't know that. There's, everybody has different perceptions, different things that are going on. And, the stress tolerance, you're an athlete, you're an actor. Your parents want you to get straight A's. You've got too many people living in your household. Your dog just died. There's a parent now has to live in another state to get a job. There's so many different stresses.
Right.
How does a 9-year-old or a 15-year-old learn how to deal with those stresses? I didn't have those stresses. How do I teach my child to deal with that stress? Right? Yeah. And that's what you're helping me do.
It's difficult, but this has been a generational issue. So mental health and suicide specifically has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and hasn't gotten better, right? So what's the approach? Well, we do a lot of different things. We throw a lot of things at it. I think we have to start early and teach people to talk about this early on, educate them, and give them the ability to build resilience, to build skills that will help them get through the tough times. Because when people hurt themselves, when people take their lives, these people do not really want to die.
I agree.
They want to live, and they want to live a happy life, but they can't get to that place.
Right.
So if we can rescue them in those pivotal moments, or give them skills to rescue themselves, I think that's what we're trying
learning
to accomplish.
self-care, learning how to say, I don't feel well, or how they can de-escalate or find some calming strategies. Mindfulness, when we first started talking about mindfulness, I had to admit, I was like, what is this mindfulness? Doesn't it
sounds
just
silly.
Turn your phone off, you know?
But that's the foundation of everything.
It's the foundation of everything. And, I was talking with somebody this morning, and she was like, I said, it's something sometimes as simple as, like, she was talking about wanting to make lemon water. Just cutting the lemon, and instead of thinking about 1,000 things, just focus on that lemon.
Watch that slice.
And the skin of the lemon, and as the burst of juice comes, so where you're just just like focusing on that one thing, and that just helps
relieve all those other scattered thoughts that are just popping into your brain.
Right. You can't be stressed. You're focusing on the present moment.
You're focusing on the present
What's going
moment.
on.
Feel the steering wheel. Feel the ribs of your steering wheel as you're driving.
Physical
and things
contact.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and it's such a part of our whole social emotional education, which, you know, now we have Marianne Flatley working in the K-12, so that's bringing even more into the elementary level.
Yes, she's
how do
terrific.
we break the hold into the elementary? We need more funding, right?
We may need a little more funding, but we just need, you know, we need a little more just, we were kind of being a pragmatic approach, right? We started in 9th grade with kids of a certain age.
Absolutely.
And then we take it down to 6th grade, and this is really great, right? The logistics of middle school make it easy.
Right.
Because all the kids in each grade get health classes in the same age group.
That's why
That's
it was
true.
So we can push it into the health classes where it makes total sense to become part of the curriculum.
Right.
And then we can just give it to the kids over and over. But high school, things get different, and people get at different ages, and it's not every year, and so forth. So there's different ways of attacking that. The Bedford Road School, I think they're employing some mechanism now, a different type of programming. But we're eager to introduce and speak with the principal down there to see how we might be able to expand and offer, even at the higher ages, if it makes sense. We were talking to Peggy Galati about starting in 2nd grade, too.
Yeah.
It would be an age-appropriate version of what we're talking about. You know.
Look, the other thing is, you know, back to our oldest ones, they were in kindergarten when the World Trade Towers came down.
Right.
And we were having conversations with our 5-year-olds that most people don't have with their 5-year-olds. So, but it was age appropriate.
Right. Yeah.
So
you can do everything age appropriate.
you bring the right language in, and the right educational language around it, and it helps those kids be able to communicate, and the teachers too. Now you're providing some of this training with the teachers.
Right.
Well, do you want to go?
No, you can go.
Well, what happened originally, we started with the kids, the students, and we said, this is great, right? And then we were sitting down with some of the administrators at Pleasantville High School, and we were talking about how can we make this even better, right? Well, we're going to monitor the program, we're going to modify it, we're going to evaluate, we're going to benchmark, so we'll do all that. But what we're really going to do is, let's introduce this kind of programming to parents and to teachers, all the people that have touches with our youth, right? And what does that do? First of all, the parents and the teachers could use this for themselves, but they could also use it to help their kids and get through things. And they would learn the same verbiage. They would understand what we're teaching them at home, and they would take a different tack towards parenting. I'm a different parent now after what I've been through with my parents.
And I wish we had these skills, those classes, when our kids were little.
Right.
But going back to the elementary school, I feel like what they need at that age is mindfulness with breathing exercises, you know, just to help with their emotional regulation, and also the vocabulary. Because at that age, it's so important to be able to pinpoint your feelings.
To pinpoint, but the thing is, so many of these younger kids, they don't know how, so it just comes out in behavior.
Exactly.
Their behavior is their communication.
Right.
And I just saw that printed somewhere, but it's something I kind of have been saying. So when you see behavior that's different, whether it's challenging behavior, overly boisterous, or even a withdrawal, anything that's different, it's an indication for the teacher or for the parent to say, what's going on?
Yeah.
And allow them to speak.
Yes.
You know? Not do you feel bad, but what's going, you know, what's this about?
Open-ended questions are very good.
Open-ended questions. So, and then don't say anything and sit back and let them, it's hard because we...
And that's being mindful, right? So that's being mindful of the situation you're in right at the moment, right? And you're talking to them, and you're trying to give them importance to what they're saying.
Right.
And then you're not also trying to fill in the blanks for them and correct everything and tell them what they should say to you.
Right.
Tell them, just ask a question and let them speak. And listen, but actually hear what they're saying.
Hear what they're saying.
Validate what they're saying. Repeat something back to them.
Exactly.
Don't solve and give them 3 options to fix.
Right.
You say, oh, that's not great. I'm sorry you feel that way. I would probably feel similarly like that. And then what do you think, you know, what do you think
we do?
Yeah, what do you think would help, or what do you think we should do together?
Right.
We might be able to put something
It's
together.
so right. You know, wow, I think I would feel like that too if that were what happened to me. You know, and well, what happens when the kid doesn't want to go to practice? Like, well, what's up with that? Like, you know, yesterday or last week you liked practice, so what happened? What's going on?
Yeah.
So Brian, an example or an anecdote is Brian loved football, and Brian in 7th grade stopped playing football. Maybe that was a good indication to us at the time. But he was also Brian was very athletic, but he was very small. So he just said, I'm small. I didn't want to play. And he got banged up in practice, and then he said that he didn't want to play anymore. But I think it was the anxiety of performing, of being expectations of whatever. And and then he went back to football in 10th grade, and loved it.
Yeah, he did. And the coaches were so great for his mental health, I have to say.
Right.
Give kudos to the football coaches.
Sure.
Yeah.
And even more, I mean, Dan Iorio was talking about that he's joined the Positive Coach Alliance.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the actual
that's
name.
Another avenue
that's
of
great.
training for the coaches. Because again, if you've got, you got some athletes, let's say you have ADHD, and they can't pay attention to what the coach is talking about because their focus is elsewhere. Well, the coaches might get annoyed, but if they have that training to realize, oh, wait a minute, okay, let me come back at you and say it all again without getting angry.
The kids tend to go to the coaches if they're in trouble because there's a special relationship.
If they
with
feel
the coach.
close.
Yeah, if they feel comfortable with the coaches.
So having the coaches with that training is really going to be really helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like opening a box and allowing these ideas and thoughts to settle and expand, because there's no one way.
Right, and you need to give kids different resources to reach out to. So usually it'll be a friend, but the next resource I know with Brian was a coach.
Right.
I think you said opening the box was really a good analogy, because I think of it as when you have all these things going on inside, it becomes like a pressure cooker, right? And when you're able to say something to somebody, even if it's just saying it to somebody, no solving anything, nobody solved your problems, they just listen to you. I think it takes some pressure off. It lets some steam out, right? You do it a bunch of times.
Yeah, because they feel heard and understood. Everybody wants to feel heard and understood.
And just circle back about the parents thing. For years before the pandemic, we were doing 4 seminars a year, or a calendar year.
I did them.
For
I was
parents.
there.
And
I love
we were getting
them.
great attendance, and it was well received. Now we're trying to do Zoom, and now we're getting back into it. And we met with PTA recently, trying to get the right theme and subject matter, what parents are looking for, and then we're going to try to supply that in an effective manner the best we can. But the main thing we need to know is, don't be afraid to talk about things. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Really listen to what someone's saying. Be mindful in yourself and take all your prejudices and all your problems in your life and put them in the shelf in your pocket for a minute and listen to what your child's saying. And just listen to what he's saying or she's saying. And where they're coming from. Because if they're 12, their 11 years before it is whatever it was. Now that's the most important thing in their life. And when they're 13, that's going to be the most important thing.
That's very true. So I know that aside from Pleasantville, you were also in a couple of other school districts, right?
Well, we're heavily involved with Alexander Hamilton High School and middle school and elementary school in Elmsford. And we've been in conversation with other schools about expansion. We're fortunate enough to use a local facilitator, hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her name, Dana O'Brien, who helps us in Pleasantville a lot and is helping us in Elmsford. But we do use a couple other facilitators as well, or instructors.
Because they would need special training in the Steps A and everything. And they get that from that cognitive, what's that place called again?
Cognitive Behavioral Consultants in White Plains.
Right, I have some friends that use that company.
They're great. If anybody needs help with something, Cognitive Behavioral Consultants does DBT kind of therapy instruction for children. They have courses, work 6 weeks, whatever, you can tailor it.
And the school district actually uses them for some of the teacher learning.
Many of the Westchester school districts use them to get up to speed on their social emotional learning. And they come in and teach programming to them in a condensed manner. And then we try to take it from there.
Right, and you're a very personal approach because you're coming, with the families and all of that. So it would be amazing to get into more schools.
I think it needs to be in every school. I think New York State passed a law that mental health curriculum should be in all high schools, and I think people should take advantage of it. But school districts get jammed up, and they're not sure how to proceed. And
is it just the high schools that they're supposed to be in?
I think it's just a high school mandate at this point in time.
I think as SEL, social emotional learning, I think that's K-12 now.
It could be. I could be
I think it's K-12.
I know the first year, the year that Brian died, it was kind of ironic because that's the year that they enacted that it had to be in the school district. So that's where we started that same year. So that February was the first time we were in.
It's so I'm so thankful. I know that there are so many families in the district are thankful that you've taken this incredibly unbelievable tragedy and have turned it into such good work to, bring this awareness, to acknowledging, it's all, we're humans.
Right.
And we need to learn.
Yeah, and it's important to share your story because after that happened with Brian, well, the first time he had an issue and he was in the hospital, and then my closest friends came up to me and told me stories about their kids being there, and they never shared that
and
before.
Nobody wants to share.
Right.
It's
it's just like it was right there. They're it's my good friends, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And they were so helpful with me.
Right.
And like that resource, I could not have gotten through that without them.
Right.
So that's what I just want to tell people: is reach out to your friends. Don't
reach out to your friends, and we're so shy about it. But I mean, it's not anybody's fault.
Exactly.
No.
Right.
It's nobody's fault.
It's a
no
physical
shame.
and
There's no
family. There's
can't
no
be.
shame to your family.
We've got. I mean, I've got 3 boys who are very different brains.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
And I can only be
That's
the
the way it
parent.
should be.
I can only be, Rick and I can only be their parent as they need us to be.
right.
Right. Yeah.
For them individually.
For them individually. And I think as educators, that's what we have to do. So what else? What's
else?
the message?
The message is that there is hope, and if anybody out there is suffering and is thinking about hurting themselves or just thinking about they need some extra resources, just know there is help. Just know that
Right.
there is hope. Just know that things would get better. Just through age and growing, I'm telling you that things would get better. If anybody needs to contact BTH, feel free to contact BTH at bthbreakthehold@gmail.com or call me. I'm sure you can find my number out there.
Or on social
throw it out
media.
there.
Right, yeah.
Right? Your Instagram. I follow you on Instagram. You have
follow
such
you
great
too.
messaging. Such great messaging. And sometimes it's just even one of those posts that you post that can really make a difference to
help.
somebody, or somebody might screenshot it and forward it on to a friend. I mean, I've done that actually with some of your posts. So, I think the social media, I know that there's dangers to it, but on some levels it also is educational and it helps normalize. I think that my younger son is a little bit more chill about certain things than our older ones do, just because it's so much more in the language.
Right.
That's great. That's
I
great
think
to
so.
hear.
I'll bring up something and he's like, yeah, I already know that, Mom.
Yeah.
The gender fluidity,
Oh,
and,
yes, like
all
with
of
all-
that.
right,
It's just,
yeah.
it's like,
Well, that's what I hope, like with all of that knowledge and how
true.
it's more open now. I hope that happens with mental health.
Right.
That's my hope.
I think it's happening. I think the next generation is prepared for it.
I think
we
so.
were not.
I think it is. Well, look, James's grade, that class of 2018 was when we brought the all of our learning special needs kids back into the district. So that grade and up has grown up with kids with learning different neurotypical.
Yeah.
Neurodiverse, and that's much more accepted. And now
Yes,
we're opening it up
exactly,
even more to the mental health, and it's all acceptable.
But what's going to happen with this too, if we improve our ability to deal with our mental health and our emotional regulation, will help eliminate bullying, isolation, drug use, murder,
it's all
crime,
linked.
hospital stays, all of it together. So we're all in it together.
Absolutely.
Just be open, talk, be kind, listen.
Right.
And be nice to the person. You never know. Like the person that cuts in front of you, you don't have to punch him in the head. You might just let him go in front of you because he's probably having a bad day and maybe needs to get somewhere.
There's your mindfulness, right? It's like,
and I usually have to put my hands in my pockets at that point in
It's
time.
like, oh, okay, wait a minute. I am not going to hit that person. I'm going to be mindful at that moment. But no, you're right, because the addressing those difficult thoughts when they're in second grade or fifth grade or whatever, if they can get the help or speak it up, they might not start using the substance abuse substances when they're in high school or whatever. So
that's usually why they use it. They self-medicate.
They're self-medicating.
Themselves feel better.
To feel
It's also,
better.
if you start at a young age, you can build resilience rather than having your resilience be beaten down
Exactly.
by episodes of anxiety or panic
Exactly.
or isolation.
Exactly. So, it really, we're an educational community, and we only. I heard something the other day. Failure, when we make a mistake, it's a growing opportunity. Every mistake you make is an opportunity to do something better. And this one guy that I really like a lot, he said, okay, instead of sitting around the table talking about what you did well today, he said, sit around the table and ask your family members, what did you fail at today?
Oh.
Because everything that you might have made a mistake on is an opportunity for discussion and an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to grow. Give yourself permission to look at that.
Not be perfect.
Not be perfect.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great?
Yeah.
So
I'm going to use that.
So on that, I'm going to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily, for your time and having us
joining me at the table.
Yeah, thank you for bringing more awareness to mental health.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And all the work you do. You do a lot of things for the community. So you're very helpful, and you've been, I've known you 20 years at least. And
Isn't that amazing?
so we're still a lot younger than we were. No, but thank you for everything.
Oh, it is my pleasure. So I'd like to thank Chief Grtutzner and Jolina and Brian Halloran for their commitment and their partnership in educating the students and supporting all the families in Pleasantville. They are just two of our BTH and the police department are just two of the partners of the Pleasantville Union Free School District, and we can't thank them enough. So thank you very much. Please look for our next edition of Inside Pleasantville Schools, and have a great day.